Hello, and thanks for joining us on KARKFOX16 Plus. I'm Ashley King. Today, we have an exciting opportunity to talk with a retired LAPD lieutenant about a new book that he recently just wrote, Reimagining Police. And the book is actually called On Thin Ice, so we're excited about that. And joining us as well to talk about this conversation is a former journalist and crisis management expert, Michelle Rupp. So I'm going to go ahead and bring them now into the conversation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hello.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. Oh,
good morning.
Good morning. Yes.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. Glad to have you guys here. Okay. So we have this book here. I'm going to, pull it up here so everyone can see. On Thin Ice. All right. So Jeff, you wrote this book here. When did this book come out?
It's probably been on a whirlwind. September 16th of this year.
Of this year. Yeah. So it just came out. And so I actually just finished reading it last night. And it's a pretty thick book, I have to say that. But it has some very great information in it. And so before we get into stuff in the book, I kind of want to talk a little bit about your background first. So for people who don't know, you are a retired LAPD lieutenant with 30 years of experience in law enforcement. So can you just tell us a little bit about your background and your upbringing as well?
Okay, because, actually the book it covers my personal background, my professional experiences, practical insights, and then the actionable solutions that I think we need to be discussing relative to how we can move forward and be successful in the 21st century in law enforcement.
Yeah.
But my background is quite unique, and I think it's really important that people understand that, because that's what created the perspective in which I looked at my law enforcement career. I was born to a teenage mother who chose to give me up for adoption, and I was adopted. My father was a sociology professor at Kent State, and my mother was a chemist for DuPont. And they wanted to have 4 children, each 1 year apart. So they were trying for a number of years to have children and were unsuccessful. So they looked into adoption. And as life often has it, they became pregnant at the time they were approved for adoption. So they chose to go ahead and follow through with the adoption. They adopted me. Then they had my sister, who was the oldest, and they adopted my brother. And he's half Japanese. And then I had a foster sister who was black. And I was raised in the 60s and 70s in Kent, Ohio.
Wow.
With this multiracial family, which gave me a unique perspective that many in law enforcement and the peers that I worked with on a daily basis didn't share.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. How does that perspective of growing up in that multiracial family like that, how did that impact you when you were out on the streets of Los Angeles every day?
Well, the realities of what I saw changed my perspective, because it wasn't necessarily overt racism that I saw, but you would see like micro racial aggressions that people oftentimes would blow off, not think were significant, but actually have a significant impact. And it's interesting because as a young boy, I don't recall looking at my sister Vanessa and seeing her skin color, or looking at my brother and seeing him as being Japanese. They were just my sister and brother who I oftentimes played with and oftentimes fought with. And it just really gave me a perspective relative to how not only I viewed people of different racial backgrounds that were in my family, but also my experiences of how people viewed us and treated us, and most importantly, treated my mother. And she walked with her head held high and conducted herself with poise and grace, which taught me through the modeling that she provided how to carry on myself.
Yeah, that's amazing. Great role model and example that you had there with your mother. So this book, On Thin Ice, where did that name come from?
Well, I was an elite hockey player. I played Division I college ice hockey. I played United States Hockey League. And the leadership lessons that I learned as a hockey player, I carried into my law enforcement career. So there's some aspect of that, the ice and my hockey background. But the reality is, I spent my entire law enforcement career reimagining policing and looking at the question of how can we do policing better. And it was my experience that it requires accountability, trust, and understanding.
Yeah.
And I felt that after my 33 years in law enforcement, that I had the experience and the knowledge that I could share to hopefully have a meaningful change in law enforcement that would impact not only law enforcement itself, but the communities in which they serve.
Yeah, definitely. And so I want to bring Michelle into this conversation now, because in this book, you're part of it. You're in a small part of it in the book. As a journalist, former journalist, we all know how, especially in today's world, how quickly things get out, information gets out when it comes to a crisis. So, you're a reporter for many, many years, and now you deal with crisis management. Can you kind of talk about how that impacts law enforcement, that relationship between the media and law enforcement?
It's a critical relationship. Many years of being a reporter and being on the streets and forging those relationships. It comes down to trust. And I know that you can understand this. Oftentimes we might get a tip of something that's taking place, but we protect those sources. We would never reveal our sources. And there's a level of trust there. And as we've progressed through time, for various reasons, that trust has eroded. And now it's almost as if there's a bit of a shift, and it could be for several reasons, but there's a shift in that, well, are they really telling us the story? Are they really telling us the truth? Are they really trustworthy? You might see the actions of one department thousands of miles away and immediately lump all the departments in that same category, when in fact that may not actually be correct. So working on building that trust and building those relationships so that when the crisis happens, the law enforcement agents walk into that press conference and they look at the news media that's assembled there, and they know there are friends in this room. Similarly, when you and I would be reporting on a press conference and we might think, this particular agency is handling the press conference great. They're going to at least give us enough where we can do our jobs, versus other agencies where we might think, this day just got even harder because this agency is going to just fight us tooth and nail to give us any information. Then we're going to be forced to rely on folks on the street.
Yes.
And,
that's
listen,
not always accurate information.
If police aren't going to talk, residents will. And you might not want them to.
Yeah, that's so true. Very true. So Jeff, can you talk a little bit about that relationship between the media and law enforcement from your perspective?
Well, from my perspective, I believe that law enforcement is too insular. And what I mean by that is, historically, they want to do all the jobs internally. And the media, in the decisions that are made relative to information that's going to be released or information that's going to be withheld, is quite critical. And law enforcement professionals oftentimes do not have the expertise to make those decisions in order to help bridge that gap and build the trust necessary with the communities that they serve. And I call him the rock star of police chiefs, William Bratton. He left the NYPD, he was a commissioner there, and he became the chief of police of Los Angeles. And one of the things he did was he civilianized the commanding officer of media relations and brought in Mary Grady, who had decades of experience and had won a number of awards in Los Angeles. And her insight and expertise and the counsel that she could give him relative to considerations that had to be had in the decisions that were going to be made regarding the information that was going to be released after critical incidents was priceless. And law enforcement needs to take that example of their rock stars, proven rock stars, and move forward. Unfortunately, we oftentimes are so insular, we only look at what we do within our own organizations, and if we didn't come up with it ourselves, we're not interested. And we can learn a lot from that. But I have the utmost respect for the media and for their expertise. And no time did I ever in law enforcement believe that I had the answers relative to how best to manage the information in serving our communities better, to build that trust and understanding, and to tell our story as law enforcement officers and the agencies.
Yeah, and I know, in this world with social media, information is going to get out there, whether it's accurate or not. So, Michelle, as someone who's been on both sides of the camera, what are some things that you've learned about how quickly, the narrative can be developed and changed because of what people are saying on social media?
Absolutely. And, now you throw in AI, and AI can craft a message, and a complete stranger could put something out on your behalf. And to your point, by the time you realize what's out there, that story's 10 miles down the road. And, with a lot of law enforcement agencies and just groups in general, being able to get ahead of that story. We talk about wanting transparency. Sometimes that's really, really hard. But if you aren't transparent, you go ahead and roll those dice and think, well, maybe I won't. Maybe I won't. I'll save this. That's the part that inevitably ends up getting out. And that then chips away at the credibility. It makes you less trustworthy than if you would have just faced it head on and taken a deep breath, knowing this is really going to be tough, but I want to be on the front end of it. That's why that way I'm saying it, or we're saying it collectively as an organization. This is what happened. It's not pretty, but this is what happened. So sure, go ahead, talk. But I've gotten to say it first.
Yeah. And so, Jeff, in your book, you do kind of talk about, some departments that got things right during major events and some that got things wrong. So how would you recommend law enforcement leaders respond effectively when it comes to, that speed, but getting the information out, accurately as well?
Well, Michelle had just mentioned the word transparency. And I got to be honest with you, I'm not a fan of that term because it's used so much. It's really a buzzword, and I'm not quite sure people even understand what that means. So what I'll share with you is what I believe it means.
Okay.
It means being honest and efficient and technologically advanced in your messaging.
Okay.
In your messaging, whether it's in everyday interactions and communication with the public that you serve, or it's following a crisis. And that's my definition, and that's what I would champion and would like to see law enforcement executives narrow the gap to achieve that type of framework. Because listen, we are so technologically advanced.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many means to reach the public effectively and efficiently, where we're able to build our accountability, create better trust, and ultimately the understanding.
Yeah.
And that understanding has to be reciprocated. Law enforcement all too often says, if they just understood, we as law enforcement professionals need to understand the public that we're serving and meet them where they stand as well.
Yeah.
And that's the message that I would champion.
Yeah, it's a two-way street, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we're going to take a quick break right now, and then when we come back, I want to talk about some more topics that are in your book. So we'll be right back. Welcome back here to KARKFOX16 Plus. We are joined by Jeff, who is a retired LAPD lieutenant, as well as Michelle Rupp, who is a crisis management expert. Thanks so much for joining us again. And so now we're going to talk some more about some other topics that you have, that you cover in your book. You talk a lot about training, and I was shocked when I read how little, I guess, training police officers actually have in the United States. I never really just thought about it, but it's only months compared to some other countries that train for years. So how do you feel training needs to be reimagined when it comes to our police force here in the United States?
Well, it's not just training. I would also say that it's education as well. And that's where the huge discrepancy is. When you look at the Nordic countries, they include education in their training. They have 2- and 3-year programs that the officers are going through before they even hit the streets as police officers. And they ultimately achieve earning an undergraduate degree in criminal justice. And where here in the United States, LAPD, you get hired with a GED. And the average academy here is 800 hours. And putting that in the context, as I mentioned in my book, to apply for your cosmetology license, you need 1,500 hours, nearly twice as many hours to be a cosmetologist than to be a police officer out on the streets, handling highly stressful, rapidly unfolding tactical scenarios. So that's shocking.
It is. It is.
But also shocking is the realities nationwide relative to our training. 60% of law enforcement officers in this country are required to fire their guns only 1 to 2 times a year on the range. Wow. 25% of law enforcement officers do not receive any training in shoot, don't shoot type scenarios.
Wow.
42% do not get any training in de-escalation. And that's significant.
How do you think, what do you think should happen then to change some of this then?
We need to start looking at the models that other countries use. As I mentioned in the first segment, law enforcement is so insular. We don't look outside of oftentimes what our own agency is doing, let alone what they're doing in other countries. Yeah. And in my book, I traveled to London and spent some time with the Metropolitan London Police. I went to Paris, France, and I see how they train differently, how they have a different mindset about what their actual function and role and responsibility in serving the public happens to be. And yes, we can make some comparisons because the reality is humans are humans regardless of what country you're in. The emotions that you have are the same that drive your behaviors. Are things a little different here in the United States where we have more guns than we have people? Yes. But there's still something that we can learn from what is working in other countries and bring it here. So I'm about confronting the difficult conversations, being honest about where we've been in law enforcement in this country, because it's a rather embarrassing history. Yeah. Being honest about where we actually stand today in our assessment on where we are. Because then and only then will we know the path forward. Listen, I bleed blue. I want law enforcement to be successful moving forward in the 21st century. And I want law enforcement to dictate how we're going to achieve that goal and not have it imposed on us. Yeah. And that is the whole purpose and function and really motivation for me writing this book.
Yeah, definitely to improve things, of course. And another thing that you mentioned in your book was about mental health. And as a police officer, you guys see the worst of the worst when it comes to mental health. And Michelle and I were talking about this earlier. As journalists, we have seen not nearly as much as what you guys see, but we see a lot of that too. How have you seen the acceptance of officers taking care of their mental health changing within law enforcement, and is there still improvement that needs to happen?
The improvement that needs to happen is the organizations accepting the fact that this is a reality and not ostracizing those who are seeking help. It's first and foremost important that you recognize that you're having a problem, but you need to be able to reach out and have resources available to you. And when you utilize those resources, not have that fact used against you and harm your career moving forward. And that's where the breakdown really is. Unfortunately, I saw 4 officers that I worked around kill themselves while they were still on the job. And as a retiree, I have a number of friends that are struggling with PTSD type symptoms and have a very hard time staying out of that, going down that dark rabbit hole and considering suicide themselves. And it's a reality, and we have to take it not only as individuals as a responsibility, but organizations have to understand their responsibility to those officers that serve in such a volatile type of profession. Yeah. Because we're not created to handle everything that we see. We're not meant to, and we have to have ways of dealing with it. And unfortunately, the culture of law enforcement is drink a beer.
I know.
I
think journalism's the same
eat
way.
More, have fast food,
Yeah,
whatever. You don't
yeah.
take care of yourselves, whether it's enough sleep, you don't eat right, you don't exercise enough. That really has to change.
Yeah, I see some similarities, a lot of similarities with being a journalist. I'm sure you were
Yes,
thinking of too as you were listening to that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Michelle, kind of want to bring you back in this conversation. Jeff does talk about AI and technology and how technology has changed things. So how should, I guess, journalists and police prepare for this future AI world that we're dealing with? You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but what are some things that we can do when it comes to that misinformation and making sure that doesn't get out there?
I think we go back to our roots, and that is with relationships, and that is establishing those relationships and establishing that trust now before the crisis, so that when that phone call inevitably comes, there's not only trust there, but you might know, or I might know, that's not anything they would ever say.
Yeah.
That's not anything they would ever put out. Something's not right here. I echo Jeff's sentiment for individual agencies to maybe look outside themselves, particularly where media is concerned, and engaging conversations with maybe people who have been in TV or journalists, because we see things a little bit different. We have a little bit different of a lens, and we know the questions that might get thrown at a press conference. Having that outside input is so valuable in, again, establishing relationships, being able to be ahead of a story, and coming through a crisis from a law enforcement standpoint, coming through that crisis, still having your integrity intact, and not having a whole lot of dings in the armor, so to speak, because they had an outside voice that came in and said,
No.
This is what I would advise in this situation, or this is what I would advise in that situation. You don't know how to form these relationships? Well, here are a few suggestion type things.
Yeah. And so real quick, I just want to ask each of you as we get ready to wrap things up, what's one small thing that each person can do to try to improve this trust between the community and policing? Start with you, Michelle.
Really? Me?
Yes, you. Yep.
What's one small thing?
A small thing that each person in the community can do to try to build that trust back between community and police.
Yeah, going back to, okay, we need to pause for a second.
You want to pause? Yeah. You got one for us, Jeff? You got an answer for that?
Well, I think it's really important when you talk about the evolution of policing. You look at Sir Robert Peel, and he had the 9 principles of policing. And the one that I think resonates the most with this question is the police are the people, and the people are the police.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that the communities that are served and the law enforcement organization that serves them are not two separate entities.
Yeah.
They actually are one. And they need to work together and care for one another in regards to the relationship that they need to foster. It's not much different than a marriage.
Yeah.
You have to treat each other with respect. You have to step with a good foot forward relative to understanding and acceptance and having an open mind. And that's how you nurture the relationship that's necessary.
Yeah. It's all about relationships, like
It
you
is
said.
all
It's
about.
all about building relationships. Well, thank you guys so much both for joining me. Jeff, for people who want to know, how can they get a copy of your book?
Well, it's pretty simple. Go to onthinicebook.com.
Okay.
And you can purchase the book there.
Perfect. All right. We'll be sure to check that out. And you have some other things in the future. We won't give it away yet, but you do have some other things you're working on in the future as well.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks.
All right, and thank you all for joining us here on KARK Fox 16 Plus.